Well, welcome everyone. My name is Elena Dunn. I'm the Assistant Vice President of Admissions here at PAU, and we are very happy to welcome you to our open house. This last session of today, will focus on the PsyD. And I'm joined by Dr. Jamie Kent from the PsyD program. So the plan for today is that we're going to go through the slides. We will talk about the program, we'll talk about admissions, and then at the end, we're going to have time for questions. And usually there are a lot of questions, so we may have to kick you out at some point because Dr. Kent will have other things to do with her day today. But we will welcome you to set up follow-up appointments with us if you have very specific questions. Dr. Kent, do you like them to ask questions in the chat or wait until the end?
I think either way. Occasionally, I'm not sure if there's a student on the call. Sometimes the students can respond to the chat in real time.
Yeah.
And anything we don't get to, we can hold till the end.
Cool. That sounds great. Anna is here, so Anna can answer any questions.
Hi,
there she is. Hi. Anna's a student in our program, so she can attend to chat, but also any questions best answered by a student. She is here, so that sounds great. All right, let me share my screen and we will get started. Go. Can everyone see that? Wonderful. All right, you're up, Dr. Kent.
Great. So welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today on the long weekend. I am, as Elena said, I'm Jamie Kent. I am one of the co-associate directors of clinical training for the PsyD program, along with Allison Thompson. She's my co-associate director. And as you see on the slide, Dr. Kimberly Hill is our director of clinical training. And not to be forgotten is Stacy Lean Boyko, who is our fierce program manager, really behind the scenes, are on the front lines with you all as students, and just an amazing advocate for all of our students. So really happy to have her as part of the team. And then, as was mentioned, Anna Barberio is also on the call, and she is entering her 4th year in the program, getting ready to apply for internship. So has ventured through the first couple of years of the PsyD program, and will be a great resource to be able to answer any questions. So the consortium is really a unique program. I think it may be one of the last consortium programs that stands in terms of doctoral training for clinical psychology. And so the program was founded in 2002, as the slide says, and it's a consortium between Palo Alto University's Department of Psychology and then Stanford University's Department of Psychiatry. And students are full-time students at Palo Alto University, but then also enrolled in 50% of their course curriculum through faculty that are employed in the Department of Psychiatry at Stanford. So it's really unique in terms of trying to take advantage of the strengths of both of these two institutions. Our program abides by the practitioner-scholar model, which essentially is a program that is really designed for students that are seeking clinically applied direct delivery of psychotherapy type services. And our program is definitely rooted in evidence-based intervention. So our curriculum and our practicum training is very much focused on both the didactic instruction in terms of evidence-based intervention, but also the application of those therapies. We've been accredited since 2006, and it is a 5-year full-time residential program where the first 4 years you are on site in the Bay Area, and then that 5th year is the APA internship, which could geographically be located anywhere in the United States. A lot of times students are interested in understanding the consortium identity because we are unique in terms of having these two separate institutions. So as I mentioned, consortium students are full-time Palo Alto University students. The degree comes from Palo Alto University, but you attend a 50% Stanford affiliated PsyD program. And we really try to split all aspects of the program about 50% between the two partnering institutions. And so you'll see, as we look at some of the curriculum in a few slides beyond, that about half of our classes are taught by Palo Alto University faculty, and then about the other half are taught by the Stanford Psychiatry faculty. One thing that's really important in our program as a PsyD program is that our students are very much interested in the application of the theory that they're learning in the classroom. And so it is required that if a faculty member is teaching any sort of intervention-oriented class, that they also are actively practicing. They are licensed and a practicing psychologist or psychiatrist. You are taught by a handful of psychiatrists that are on the Stanford arm, which is an interesting experience for students. But from my perspective, I think that brings a richness to the classroom when many of your instructors are also active clinicians. Seeing clients on the side that they can bring into the instruction and make the material come to life. Research opportunities are also offered at both Palo Alto University and the Stanford Department of Psychiatry. And your dissertation committees have to have at least one faculty member from each partnering institution on that committee. Many of our students tend to get involved with research at Stanford. And that's largely because of the applied nature of the research that happens in the Department of Psychiatry at Stanford. There are cool things from clinical trials of new therapies or opportunities to potentially be involved in some assessments as different research studies are happening, and our students tend to gravitate towards those opportunities. Not necessarily that the research is better or more innovative at Stanford compared to PAU, but I think it's more clinically applied compared to the Palo Alto University research, which in a Department of Psychology is going to be your traditional types of research that many of you may have experienced if you were a psychology undergrad major at your university that you studied in. We can advance the slide. Okay, so here's our 5-year plan. So as I mentioned, this is a 5-year degree program. The first 3 years are very much focused on didactic instruction, where you are taking classes, and much heavier in the first year, a little bit less so in the second year, and a little less in the third year. So there's a developmental sort of gradual approach to decreasing classes, but then increasing other types of responsibilities. So in addition to your coursework, you will also take, most programs have what's called a comprehensive exam, a clinical comprehensive exam. And in many programs, when you pass that comprehensive exam, you advance to candidacy. So in the PsyD program, when you pass your comprehensive exams, you then qualify for your master's degree and advance to candidacy for the doctoral degree. In a program that I went to, for example, we had one comprehensive exam where it's all this monster exam that you take at one time. In our program, we've decided to break that down into smaller chunks so that students take a smaller comprehensive exam after each of the first 3 years. So in the first year, you take assessment, and then you have an assessment comprehensive exam at the end of that year. In the second year, you take a statistics, and then you have that comprehensive exam. And then in the third year, you have your clinical comprehensive exam. And when you pass all 3 of those, you earn your Master's of Science degree from Palo Alto University, and you advance to candidacy for the doctoral degree. That's the academic portion in terms of the classwork that you'll be taking, and then the comprehensive exams that are making sure that you're gaining the knowledge that we want you to be gaining in order to advance to candidacy. In addition to the academic work, there's of course the clinical work, which as PsyD students, our students are extremely interested in the clinical work. Students have the opportunity, if you see at the bottom of the slide, to get involved in what we call supplemental practicum, which are optional from year 1 all the way through the program. They are not required, but these are opportunities to potentially, they vary in hours from maybe 2 hours to 5 hours, 6 hours a week. So not a huge time commitment, but allows students to try different types of clinical experiences or work with different patient populations. Again, largely in Stanford's Department of Psychiatry or at Palo Alto University. And these are smaller opportunities, but give students different types of experiences that help them to decide if there's an area of interest that they would like to pursue. In terms of the foundational practicum, you have 3 years of practicum that you will complete, and those are in your second, third, and fourth years. Those placements tend to be 16 to 24 hours a week, so much more of a commitment compared to the supplemental, which is a smaller time commitment and optional. The primary placements are not optional. You must complete them in order to obtain your degree. In year 2, our foundational practicum is all takes place in-house. And so we have several placements that our students train at for that first practicum year. And they are Palo Alto University's Gronowski Clinic, which is a community-based clinic. And there are 2 specialty clinics within the Gronowski Center, the Sexual and Gender Minority Clinic, and then the La Clínica Latina. And so both of those 2 clinics are specialty clinics pulling for sexual and gender minorities for one, and then for the other pulling for a Spanish patient population within the community. And then in addition, for the foundational practicum, some of our students train at the Palo Alto VA's mental health clinic, so working with veterans in an outpatient setting. All of those placements are really rooted in helping students to get evidence-based training early on. And then in the third and fourth year, there are a lot more choices in terms of the practicum placements that students can pursue. I think we have a slide on this actually later, but there are about 40 to 45 placements in the larger Bay Area that students can complete training in. And then we also have several captive programs, which are placements that work with our program and sometimes the PhD program as well exclusively. And those are in the third and fourth year. So first year is primarily classes, maybe a supplemental placement. Second year, you have your classwork and your practicum. Third year, you have your classwork, practicum, and then you're starting on your dissertation. So dissertation is really happening in your third and fourth year. And many of our students who get involved in labs, whether it's at Palo Alto University or Stanford, can develop their dissertation projects from those labs. Ideally, students defend their dissertation prior to their 5th year when they're headed to internship. We actually have a pretty high rate of students that are able to successfully defend their dissertation prior to going to internship. It's significant because it means when you are on your full-time clinical placement as an intern in that 5th year, you are not trying to juggle completing research or writing on the side, and it really does sort of free up time for you to fully delve into your internship experience. Many of our students are able to do that. Once you've completed your dissertation and your internship, you officially earn your PsyD degree. So this is another view of the first 5 years of the program. And so what I like about this view is you can see in year 1, compared to years 2 and 3, just how much heavier the classwork is. I'm not going to go through and read each of the different classes that you'd be taking. I think this is also available online if you're interested to really dive deeply into the class specifics. But you can see that in the first year, I think it's about 5 classes per quarter. So we are on a quarter system at Palo Alto University. And then in contrast, in second year, when you're adding in that first practicum placements, it's about 4 classes per quarter. And then third year, it's even fewer. And in fact, in third year, there are not that many required classes at that point in time. Students are at that point taking more electives. And then we have some really cool electives that students are able to take. Many of them are focused on different interventions. Again, in a PsyD program, our students are really eager to gain as much experience with clinically applied theory and intervention as they can. So we have classes like acceptance and commitment therapy, dialectical behavior therapy, couples and family therapy. We have a class on trauma, which our students really love. So lots of really cool classes. And then in fourth year, you're done with your classes, as you can see, and that's really the year where you're trying to wrap up that dissertation, really focus on dissertation and applying for your internship placement. And then finally in the 5th year, you'll be completing that completing the internship placement. So practicum opportunities. I think this is a huge benefit of a program like ours, is just the large number of clinical training opportunities that are accessible to students. You know, training in the San Francisco Bay Area, it is fairly diverse in terms of the different community-based placements that are available, and diverse in terms of the types of settings that students can train in. You know, I trained in an area where we had maybe 3 or 4 placements we could choose from. And this is very different. You have, like I said earlier, maybe 40 to 50 different types of sites and settings that you can pick from. So I think that's a really great benefit of training in this type of program and area. So as mentioned, the supplemental practicum are optional, and those are available throughout all years. I do think that even though they are optional, many of our students are really eager to get involved. And I would say that the majority of our students do end up completing supplemental practicum at some point in their training years. That foundational practicum, as I mentioned, is largely housed within Palo Alto University, and then also at the Gronowski Center, and then also at the VA. And all of the supervisors in those placements are faculty within our institution. So we really try to provide a lot of oversight around the supervision that students are getting in that first practicum training year. In terms of the intermediate and advanced practicums in years 3 and 4, we have a number of captive sites that our students are able to apply to. And again, captive site means that either only PsyD students from PAU or PsyD and PhD students from PAU can apply to those. In contrast to our external sites, where we have maybe 10 or so different universities, doctoral universities in the Bay Area. And so you're applying to these programs along with other students at these other training programs in the Bay Area. And so for captive sites, we have, as you can see here, Stanford Inpatient takes students, La Clinica Latina I mentioned, Sexual Gender Identity Clinic at Gronowski I mentioned. We have our Stanford Child and Adolescent program, which is really cool. You do rotations through different clinics in the Department of Psychiatry at Stanford and also at Lucile Packard's Children's Hospital. We have the Stanford Faculty Staff Help Center, where students are able to provide therapy for employees and faculty at Stanford. We have East Palo Alto Academy, which is a high school in East Palo Alto, which has an affiliation with Stanford's psychiatry department. And the psychiatry department provides all the mental health services at the high school. We have Palo Alto VA. So we have a number of different captive sites that our students really enjoy their training at those. And then in terms of external sites, there are just so many. So there are just a handful that are mentioned here, but we have academic medical centers like UCSF, San Francisco VA. We have freestanding medical systems like Kaiser, Santa Clara. We have college counseling centers like Santa Clara University. We don't have listed here any community-based clinics. We have a large number of community-based clinics, some of which are very niche in terms of the patient populations they serve, whether that's based on cultural identity, racial or ethnic minorities. There are a lot of different community-based clinics that our students end up training in. We also have a number of school-based sites, so elementary and high school-based sites. So I think that from my perspective, I feel like the clinical training is a great benefit of this program. There are so many options for students. I think sometimes it can feel a little overwhelming, and that's where your academic advisor seeking out mentorship can come in. But we can advance to the next slide. So in that final year, in the 5th year, is, as I mentioned, when students will be completing their APA accredited internship. And for any clinical psychology doctoral program, you must complete an internship in that final year in order to graduate. And this slide is showing us our match rate. So it is a national match where you are interviewing geographically wherever you've applied. And we certainly encourage our students to be open to not just leaving the Bay Area. The Bay Area, if you've lived here, can be hard to leave. You may want to stay. But also, considering other geographic areas. But you can see our match rates are very high. We provide a lot of support around internship. I will say, I think our students are very ambitious too, and have done a lot. And when you see their resumes, their CVs, they're quite impressive. But we do have an internship prep course, which students take that helps them to, it helps them to receive guidance and mentorship around different components of the application and preparing for interviewing and that sort of thing, which is helpful to them. They're also students are assigned an internship coach where they have a faculty member that they can reach out to if they have questions that are really specific to their training or interests, or would like feedback on different aspects of their application. So we do provide a lot of scaffolding around the internship process, which I think probably also helps. But this is, I think an important thing to consider when you're looking at doctoral programs for clinical psychology is the internship phase and how successful applicants are at that phase. And then following internship, once you get your doctoral degree, so you have your PsyD degree, you are at that point trying to get licensed. And for our program, we have a very high number of our students who do go on and get licensed, which is not surprising given we're a PsyD program and students tend to want to become clinicians. They're less interested in other paths that you might take with a doctoral degree in psychology. And so what's cool about this slide, this is from the most recent licensing exam outcomes data that has been published. But if you look at the left-hand column, you can see that the pass rates for all students from doctoral programs that are taking the licensure exam compared to our program, and there's quite a difference in terms of 80% pass rate for all applicants or all students that have taken the exam compared to our program is much higher. I can't quite read that. I think it's 96%. One thing that we like to point out is, which I think is interesting, I think Dr. Hill thinks is interesting too, is that first column under biological bases. So just maybe I should back up a step, but the EPPP is sort of like a big there isn't a psychology GRE, I don't think anymore. There used to be, but it's a test that's really specific to your knowledge in psychology. And so there are these different domains that you see on the top column: bio bases, cognitive and affective bases, social and cultural bases. So you're tested on these different domains to make sure you have a certain level of knowledge in order to become licensed. And so I like to point out that first column with the bio bases. That's actually the biggest differential among all of the columns, where our students are scoring 6.62% higher than the average student who's taking this exam. And I think that is likely due to the fact that this is a consortium with a medical school where students are being taught by medical doctors. So some of their curriculum is taught by psychiatrists, and there is definitely a biopsychosocial emphasis in a number of the classes, which I think probably has led to that column being a little bit higher. And then I also like to point out the social and cultural bases is also pretty high, and PAU specifically has a very strong commitment to not just DEI issues, but also trying to infuse DEI throughout all aspects of curriculum and training. And so I think that's showing up there too. This is a recent class of our graduates. Looks like our class of 2021. Just a cool slide where you can see all of our recent grads. We usually have 30 students in each cohort. So in each class that comes in, there are 30 students, and you do take, the bulk of your classes together in those first couple of years until students are taking electives, at which point there can be some variation depending on areas of interest and focus.
I think this is me.
Okay, great.
Wonderful. So a quick slide on the admissions process, and all of this is examined in much more detail on our website. So I definitely recommend you go to the website. get a lot more information. But some key dates. So we have an early consideration deadline of November 15th and a regular consideration deadline of January 8th. A lot of people ask, what does early consideration mean? It really means that it's sort of a point in time that we encourage you to aim for if you want to be among the first applications reviewed. So we don't do early admissions, we don't do early decision, but early consideration deadline is sort of around the time where if you apply by now, you'll be in that first group of applicants who are reviewed. Generally, applicants are reviewed in the order that they apply. So there is some benefit of applying early in that you may hear earlier on whether you're advancing through the process, but there's no statistical advantage to applying early. Everyone who applies in time and has a full application gets full consideration for the program. There is some recommended preparation. So these 5 courses that are listed here are recommended, however, they're not required. I will say that most successful applicants have had an academic background in psychology, or at least taken some coursework in psychology, even if it wasn't your major. So we do recommend that you have some academic background in psychology. And then a strong preference is given to applicants with clinical experience. This is very important that you know what you're getting into, you know that this is the space that you want to be in and that you've had a background. We know it's been more challenging to get clinical experience during COVID. So certainly feel free to set up a call or a meeting with us to talk about your experience. There can be some flexibility on what clinical experience means in a world where COVID made it harder to do that. Application is pretty straightforward. You're going to apply through PsyCAS, which is our centralized online application system, and all materials go to PsyCAS. So we don't want you sending us transcripts or written statements. It all goes to PsyCAS. And we will ask for a resume, a statement of purpose specific to the PsyD program, 3 letters of recommendation, and those should be from faculty or professionals who've interacted with you in a sort of professional, more formal setting. We will not accept letters from psychiatrists, psychologists who are your personal therapists, family members, friends, those sorts of things. And then we do need official transcripts from every college or university that you've attended. Again, those should go directly to PsyCAS. Finally, we have a lot of students who are clinically oriented who want to apply to both the PsyD and the PhD. You are more than welcome to do that. It does not hurt you in any way to apply to both. The easiest way to do this is to apply to the PsyD in PsyCAS. And one of the questions you will see is, do you also want to be considered for the PhD? If you click yes, then there'll be a pop-up that comes open that says, great, here are some additional questions specific to the PhD. We strongly recommend that you do a distinct written statement for the PhD and the PsyD. Doing one statement for both generally is not recommended. So we do recommend you take the time to really understand the 2 programs and explain why each program is a good fit for you. If you do it this way, you only pay 1 application fee instead of 2. If you decide later, after you've hit submit, that you want to apply to the PhD, you can just call or email the admissions office and we can manually add that for you. Here's the general timeline. So in just a few days, the application is going to open. As I said, applications are reviewed once they're complete, and that generally is in the order that applications are received. We will ask you to apply no later than January 8th, and we do need your materials in by the 22nd. So that is transcripts, that's letters of recommendation. So if you have recommenders who are busy, you want to get on it right away so they have plenty of time to get those materials in. You do not need letters of recommendation complete or transcripts complete before you hit submit, but after you hit submit, you will have until the 22nd to get those in. Now, if they come in after the 22nd, we just can't guarantee that our interview slots won't be full. So it's really important to get on the ball and make sure your materials come in on time. The PsyD has not decided yet when their interview weekends are, but they're generally between January and March, and they usually host an admitted student event or events as well. So those generally happen after interview weekends and after decisions have gone out. And then we will ask you to enroll no later than April 15th. One thing that I do want to point out, because the number one question that comes into the email inbox from PsyD applicants is, what's the status of my application? I promise you that we will give you updates as soon as we can on the status of your application. However, this is an extremely popular program and it has a very, very high volume of applications. So it is not unusual for many weeks to go by between when you've applied and when you hear an update. And that's really because the admissions committee reads every application and then makes decisions about who's going to come and interview. So even if you apply in September, it can be not until the spring that you get an update. So please be patient. We promise we'll update you as regularly as we can with any updates that are required. And then to learn more, we will be hosting a deep dive webinar in October, which will walk you through all of the steps to the application. So if you're feeling a little anxious about what do I do, what do these screens mean, we'll walk you through. We also have last year's recording available on our website, so you can watch that. And then we do have counselors available to do one-on-one appointments. We also have an amazing group of current students who can talk to prospective students about their experience. So that is available if you want to do that. Generally, early on in the process, we'll be interacting with the Office of Admissions, not faculty. So if you have questions early on, we really recommend you direct them to admissions. And if there's something we can't answer, we can connect you with current students or faculty at that point. And that's all the slides. So maybe I'll stop sharing and go back to the chat and see what we have.
Yeah, so we have some questions about whether interviews will be held virtually or if there's a hybrid model or what that will look like for this year.
Interesting. Jamie, have you heard about that yet? I haven't heard yet.
I haven't heard officially, but I can't imagine there would not be a virtual option.
Great, great. But as soon as we'll know, we'll let you all know.
And then there was another question about how many credits can you transfer over, I believe was the question.
Thanks. Yes, I think the maximum is 30 units. Generally, students don't transfer that much. Actually, it's pretty, it's not that common for students to bring in that many units across any program. You will need to submit syllabi from the courses and have those evaluated. So it can benefit you and it might allow you to take a lighter course load throughout one of your terms or take extra electives. But everyone is with us 5 years or more, so it doesn't accelerate your time to graduation.
I will say too that for the PsyD program, it's like a set price for each quarter. So even if you have credits for a certain class, you would get to decide whether or not you want to take that class for that quarter or take the time to do a supplemental or whatever you need to, but you wouldn't pay any less for it. So a lot of students choose to retake the class just to get fresher learning on it and to be around the cohort and hear questions and things like that.
That's great. Thank you.
Let's see. We have a question about financial support as well.
Yeah, so the program is not fully funded. So that's the key thing to keep in mind. There is a small pool of money available for students in the form of scholarships. I think those average about $30,000. But what that means is that most students are paying for the program either out of pocket entirely or are taking out loans. So you can find the full cost of attendance on the website, and we really encourage students to really do a careful budget so that they understand kind of what their obligation is, factoring in cost of living because it is not cheap in the Palo Alto area, and making sure that that's a good investment on your part in terms of potential indebtedness when you leave the program.
And then in terms of graduate assistantships, there's not like a traditional assistantship stipend that you would receive like you would in maybe a PhD program in certain programs. You can get jobs through PAU or sometimes through Stanford as well. So you could do, what is it called? Work study. You could do a work study through your loan, but there's not a traditional graduate assistantship where you would work with a specific researcher and get a stipend for the research. You can do TAing. It's also an option, or working for different programs throughout PAU. And then there was questions, total cost of the program. So it's about $60K each year. And then it does go down your fourth year slightly when you're not taking any classes. And then your fifth year when you're on internship, it is significantly less. As far as specialty programs, so the PhD side does have specialty programs where you could do an LGBTQ plus emphasis or forensic emphasis, neuro emphasis. I think there are a couple more. The PsyD program doesn't have specific emphasis, but you can get a very broad like range of things that you want to do. And if neuro is something that you are passionate about, we have assessment courses. You will be getting like the training on things like that. And you can make connections through Stanford or PAU where you would be doing supplemental or full-time practicum that is assessment or whatever interests you. For me, when I was applying, I was super interested in being a part of like the LGBTQ plus emphasis. And then when I realized it was only on the PsyD side or on the PhD side, I was able to be a part of the SGIC specialty clinic at Gronowski, which is specifically for clients who identify within the LGBTQ plus community. There are plenty of supplementals you can do. You can do your research based off of it. So there's no like specific specialty that's going to be like on your degree or anything, but if something is important to you, there are plenty of opportunities for that. And then we have some questions about international students, about what their path to licensure might look like, and how PAU supports international students.
Yeah. Dr. Kim, do you have any insight into what that experience looks like for international students once they're done?
Yeah, I haven't heard much, so I would assume that they're doing okay in terms of licensure. It may depend on where ultimately they're trying to practice, if they're trying to return to their country of origin. But what I will say is that for international students at the training level, there is one, I didn't mention this earlier, the VA system, it does not allow students to train in it if you're an international student. That has not always been true. That could change. But that is one limitation that international students have in terms of the current VA system. That doesn't impact your licensure. It just means in terms of your training opportunities, you would look at other training opportunities, look at training in other settings instead. But we usually have a handful of international students in each cohort, and I've never heard any problems with licensure.
Right. I would say it's important to do due diligence because we support, you're allowed to be in the US when you're a student, but once you're not a student, we can't do anything, right? You can do OPT, once you graduate, but that's usually about a year. Sometimes you could do 2 years. So you really want to check and see, are there places that I want to work that will sponsor me, right, for a work visa? Because otherwise, you could have the degree but no way to practice. So we will support you while you're here to make sure you get all of the classes you need, you get the visa you need, and after that, it's kind of up to you. So you may want to have a conversation with our international student advisor just to see if she has some more information about what it looks like once you graduate.
Okay, so we have questions about research outside of dissertation. So for the PhD program, you would be required to select a specific professor to research under and be in a lab. For the PsyD program, you're not required to do any research, but most students end up doing some form of research, and that could be leading a group that is a part of a research study, or being a part of a more traditional lab where you're gathering data or writing papers. Most students choose to be a part of research, and there's plenty of opportunity. If you're not super interested in research, you could go through the program and only interact with a research project in like for your dissertation, but there are plenty of opportunities for it. In terms of like connecting with current students, I'm happy to put my email in there, and then I run one of the programs through admissions to help connect students to current students. So I'll put my email at the end just so it doesn't get lost with other questions. In terms of, does the VA require citizenship or a green card? I believe it does require citizenship. Is that right? Okay. And then there's a question, is PAU a yellow ribbon school?
We are a yellow ribbon school. If you are interested in using your benefits or dependent benefits, please make an appointment to meet with Lisa Harris. She's our veteran support coordinator. She can really help you understand how to maximize your benefits, what they look like, and thinking about housing benefits and all of that. So definitely make an appointment with her. I'll put her email in the chat.
Okay. And then in terms of, we have a question about the cohort sizes between the PsyD and the PhD programs. Yeah, the PhD program tends to admit around 60 per cohort, but once you're admitted, they tend to split the like original admitted group into different smaller cohorts. So you would be within a cohort of, or like a cohort group of, sometimes they split it in 2, sometimes they split it in 3. So you would get that smaller feel still in the PhD program. And then I think in the PhD program, you wouldn't necessarily have all of your classes with the same people, whereas the PsyD program for the first and second year, you're with all of your cohort for every single class. So that helps you get closer to people and you know people really well. So there's a question, as a non-traditional student, I am receiving conflicting info about CV format and standards. What length/format does admissions prefer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it varies depending on how much experience you have. You know, if you have a traditional CV where you're putting research papers and things like that, it can be quite long. I think that's somewhat unusual for applicants to this program. Dr. Kent is someone who reads applications. How much detail do you want? How many pages do you prefer?
Yeah, I mean, I think that at this stage of training, the CV is not terribly long. And in fact, there's a wide variety in terms of the way that the CV looks, and many students are submitting resumes and not a CV. And that's okay. We're able to sort of extract the most important pieces. We're really looking for, as Elena said earlier, that there's some commitment to clinical training, and whether that's having completed working with clinical populations, or sometimes that's teaching or volunteering, just making sure that that's showing up in some way. And if you have research experience as well, you know, applying to a doctoral program, it's helpful to have had some experience working in a research setting. Not all of our students do have that, but it's helpful to show, if you do, to show that. So I would say probably on average, there may be 2 pages. Some of them are longer. If we have students that are coming right out of undergrad who maybe don't have as many experiences. And then we have some students who are coming to this degree as a second career, and have their CVs may look very different. But in the end, we're looking for your commitment to this. This is you know, when you're applying for a doctoral degree in psychology, whether it's a PhD or a PsyD, it's a long road. So we want to make sure that you know what you're getting into and you're committed to it. And so, you know, it's reflecting that in your experiences and being honest about your experiences is most important.
Okay, and then there are questions about if you were a non-psychology major or if you're coming from a non-psychology background. We do have students who don't have psych degrees in undergrad. In my cohort, we have people who were like bio majors or philosophy. We have someone who was coming from a like bio related master's program. So you absolutely don't have to have a psych major in undergrad. I think it would help for you to get clinical experience before coming in, just so the program sees that, like, even though you weren't in a psychology major, you have engaged with clients and you know what the work might look like. You would probably have to take some of the prerequisites at like a community college or somewhere that you can find it. Like, you would still have to complete the required courses, even if you didn't have it as a major. A lot of people try to volunteer at like suicide helplines or crisis lines, and those can be easy to get good experience in and a lot of training. And I believe we are not requiring the GRE. Is that correct?
You're not. No, not this year.
Okay.
I saw a lot of questions about prerequisites. I'll just sort of mention they do not need to be complete before you apply. They do need to be, if you're going to take them, obviously you want to take them before classes start. Again, they are not required. They are recommended. When you apply, you will say, here's what I've already completed and here's what's coming up. So you put that these are courses in progress, and you will send us your transcripts, and there'll be point in time. So whatever's, on your transcript at that point is fine. You will send us final transcripts before you enroll. But again, prerequisites are simply recommended, so you don't need to be continually updating us on what you've completed. We sort of look at the materials that you provide primarily in that application. I'm trying to look through. I'm going to scroll back a little bit. What portion of admitted students are non-psychology majors? I don't know offhand, actually. I'd have to find out. Like Anna said, not everyone is a psychology major. If you want to contact current students, you can go through me. Happy to connect you with current students. Nicole asks, is there a section in the application we can speak on changing career? That is a really good topic for your personal statement. There is also a section that says, is there anything else that you want the admissions committee to know? And you could put additional information there. But yeah, you probably want to talk about a career change as your part of your motivation in your personal statement. Typically, I see PsyD programs with larger cohorts than the PhD, but we seem to be the opposite. Yeah, so Claudia, it's an interesting question. So PAU started as a professional school. So the first program we had was a PhD in clinical psychology. And that just means that we had larger cohorts of PhD students. And we've continued to have that model moving forward. Part, I think, of the limitation of the PsyD program is the partnership with Stanford. And so part of that agreement is you will have 30 students and no more. And so that is part of the reason why that swap occurs.
One of the newer questions is asking about how many applicants we tend to receive for the program.
Yeah, a whole lot. We get a lot. So I think it was close to 600 last year, maybe more. So it is important to know this is what we consider a highly selective program. I think our admission rate for this year is going to be somewhere in the single digits, probably around 7 to 8%. So it is highly selective. What I want you to leave here knowing is that if you are not admitted to the program, it does not mean that you should not be in clinical psychology, and it doesn't mean you are a strong candidate. The program has to turn down many strong candidates, and that is just the nature of highly selective admissions. What it also means is you should have a plan B. Folks should have another option if this doesn't work out.
And then how many interviews do we tend to have?
Okay, let me do the math. So I think they tend to interview about 120. I'm thinking to past years, that sounds about right. Admit about half of those and enroll 30. So probably 10% or less of applicants get an interview.
And then in terms of what the interview structure looks like, I'm not 100% sure if that's going to change this year or what it will look like, since I think they're still figuring out Zoom versus in person. You will have like individual interviews with several faculty members. You would attend interviews as a group where you would be receiving information, but there's not like a group interview where you would be being asked questions about yourself and your CV and things like that in front of other applicants. In terms of the PhD program, whether it's a consortium, it's not a consortium, but I do know that a lot of PhD students do research with Stanford as well. That's definitely still a possibility. When do we have to pay the full tuition for that year? So you pay by quarter. It usually is like a month before the quarter starts. Yeah, so you don't pay for the full year upfront.
I'm seeing a lot of questions about forensic psych. I have generally thought forensic psych and neuropsych were probably a better fit for the PhD, but Dr. Kent, what's your thought on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. So if you know coming in as an applicant that you have a really strong interest in forensics or in neuropsychology, you're going to be a much better fit for the PhD program where they have those areas of emphases or tracks. And so what that means is from the beginning of your time in graduate school, you're going to be focused on that niche. That would not be true if you were in the PsyD program. It's not that you can't have a forensic or neuropsych background, but you will be having, I think students who are really willing to go above and beyond and find opportunities for themselves and advocate for themselves are going to be better fits than if you're in the PsyD program. You would have to go sort of above and beyond. Whereas if you're in the PhD program with that interest, it's already set up for you. So it's much more plug and play in terms of your research opportunities, your mentorship that you would receive, and then also the clinical training. So you can do it in our program, but we tend to steer those applicants towards the PhD program, just being fully transparent. I think just sort of jumping back to the areas of emphasis question, I wanted to just echo what Anna said, which is that the PsyD program is really a generalist program. The focus is on trying to give students the most well-rounded training experiences within the PsyD degree that they can achieve. That being said, because as I mentioned before, we have so many different clinical training opportunities, and we have such a wide variety of research opportunities that are available to students, students oftentimes do develop an area of interest over the course of their training year. So they're not coming in from day one and saying, trauma is my thing. Sometimes this happens, but it's rare. And that's going to be my path throughout grad school. It's more like they try their hand at different things and then realize, oh my gosh, I really love trauma. So let me focus my dissertation on that. I want to do a training at the VA system, or I want to work in community health with underserved populations who are experiencing trauma in their lives. And that becomes a story over time. The one area that I would say that we have maybe a little bit more structure, but it's not a formal track, is for our students who are interested in working with kids and adolescents, so a younger age range. So I would encourage you, if you do apply to our program and have interest in that, to make sure that that's clear in your application, that you're somebody who wants to work with children, adolescents, families, because we do have a little bit of, again, it's not an official track, but we do have some structure in place for those students as they go through the program. One other thought about that is, I think with the emphasis with Stanford and the Department of Psychiatry being housed in a medical school, there are a lot of opportunities to work with medical populations too. And so one thing I have seen over the years is health psychology or behavioral medicine becoming an area of interest for a number of our students over time.
That's really helpful. Thank you, Dr. Kent. Someone asked, my past institution is closed since I attended. That's probably something to email me about. Usually transcripts are put in conservatorship, so you can still find them like from the state, but please email me if you want to talk about that.
There's a question about more specific about the pediatric track. Essentially, you would be taking like a couple extra courses, or you would have to use one of your electives to be focused on children. But there are plenty of practicums that you would have the opportunity to work with kids or adolescents. And you would take like the child assessment course for one of the assessment series instead of the adult assessment course. I said there's a question about if it's difficult to join research at Stanford. It's not. I think it takes like some initiative, whether you want to be a part of a PAU research lab or a Stanford research lab. It will take you like reaching out to whoever the faculty is. But from my experience, researchers at Stanford and PAU are very open to bringing in PsyD students on their research. So I would not say it's difficult. And many of your professors are also faculty members who will be doing research. So that's a good opportunity to like create a relationship and learn more about their research too. There is a question about women's mental health and perinatal mental health. We definitely have a lot of students who are interested in that. There is sometimes offered a women's mental health elective, depending on how many students are interested in it. There are plenty of sites that are focused towards women's mental health, and then there are a lot of hospital sites also that you could work within perinatal health.
Dr. Alin Barrera in the PhD also has a strong focus on maternal mental health. So she'd be an excellent person to look into as well.
Thank you. Yeah. Does the PsyD program have an equal emphasis on training for psychotherapy and assessment, or one more than the other? Definitely you will get more psychotherapy experience, probably. There are practicums that you can do that are fully assessment. If you are interested in working with kids, you probably want to get more assessment hours. And you will, like, everyone has the full year of like an assessment course that will be across 3 quarters. So you do have like a year's worth of training, and everyone will need to get some assessment hours. It's been more difficult during the pandemic because a lot of assessments can't be done virtually. But assessment is definitely something that if you're interested in, you would have to like specifically look out sites or supplementals that have the assessment right now, just because most sites, even the sites that had assessment built in, have less hours available because it's over Zoom. But also like internship sites are like, they know that that's why a lot of us don't have as many assessment hours. And then there's a question about what types of certificates or trainings would be good to have on a CV.
I don't know, Dr. Ken, is there anything that you notice more than others, or is sort of a variety?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a variety. Actually, I'd say it's probably unusual coming into doctoral training. I think it's more likely that you're going to get specialized training as a doctoral student. Sometimes students that are entering grad school have, as Anna mentioned, maybe been involved in a community-based agency or on a hotline of some sort that did involve intensive training. And so if or sometimes maybe you've been in a research study that involved intensive training on certain measures or those sorts of things. Or if you're in a medical system, they have certain trainings that you have to take to be HIPAA compliant or to be able to access PHI, so patient information. And so those sorts of things you could certainly highlight. We wouldn't be expecting applicants to have completed trainings at this stage.
There's a question Megan asked a little earlier about, how much clinical experience, and if I'm starting something in the fall, is that considered? I would say generally, my advice would be to not apply until you have experienced a clinical environment. I don't necessarily think you'll be as strong an applicant as you could if your clinical experience is coming up. For 2 reasons. One is you don't know what clinical work is like yet. And so you know, that's not answering that question that the department asks. Is like, you know, we want to know that you know, you like this. The other thing is that until you have clinical experience, it's really hard to talk about why you want to be in a clinical environment in the application and also in the interviews. It's really important that you have been thoughtful about clinical experience for the interviews. So my general recommendation is if you don't have any yet and you will not have any clinical experience at the time that you apply, to wait a year or two and to come back and apply at that point. All right, so I see we're at 12:30, so I want to be respectful of Dr. Kent and Anna's time. So I think I will thank them for coming, release them to their long weekend, but I'll stick around if there's any other questions that I can answer. Thank you so much for your time, Dr. Kent and Anna, and for answering questions.
Thank you so much. And thank you all for coming on the long weekend and showing interest in the program. I look forward to reading some of your applications.